It's Friday. We got a lot to do, so drop it. Power panel. Thank you, John Irola. Kenya Evelyn joins us from Guardian USA. I feel safer already. I'm being guarded. Oh, right. The newspaper, the one that is actually honest, great reporting, and doesn't hate progressives. So
Thank you.
How's that for a compliment? So when I do the power panel thing of dropping it and whatever awkward thing I say, my favorite part of Friday is when I can see on Skype all the other hosts and producers going, "Oh,
guilty."
You made
it. All right. So are we going to have a fantastic show? I'm afraid the answer is yes. So lots of information, because that's kind of what we're in the business of, but also progressive perspective, i.e. the truth. And obviously we'll come at it with a little bit of passion, as you might suspect, especially about Texas, where I'm raring to go. All right, John Irola, legend of the internet, proceed.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard that, but now I'm going to repeat it ad nauseum. Anyway, Ted Cruz is still facing a ton of criticism over his decision to be a good dad by going to Cancun while millions of his constituents go without power or food or drinkable water. His explanation has evolved a bit. Let's take a look at one of the most recent forums.
Whether the decision to go was tone deaf, look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad, and all of us have made decisions. When you've got two girls who have been cold for two days and haven't had heater power, and they're saying, "Hey, look, we don't have school. Why don't we go? Let's get out of here."
Yeah, they're freezing. Dad, save us. Take us to the most convenient place. Down Cancun way. But anyway, I as I talked about on the damage report this morning, I hate the little shrugs and the little, like it's so affected, it's so on purpose and performative, his attempt to be folksy, and it just doesn't sell, especially when he is trying to defend the indefensible. What do you think?
Yeah, so John, I kind of like the shrugs because he looks weak doing it. He looks like a beta. And so like what you could tell when he's lying, well, first of all, when his mouth opens, but second of all, when he's defensive about his lying, when he does he moves his head, he moves his shoulders a lot, and it looks weak and defensive. Here's how Trump would have handled this. I went down to Cancun because only suckers and losers stay in the cold. I'm a very stable genius. Stable geniuses go to Cancun. I can afford it because I'm really rich, unlike those suckers in Texas. And everybody in Texas who is a Republican would have been like, yes, what a genius that guy is. So in a sense, politically, Ted Cruz has made a mistake here by admitting a mistake. Now, I see people still looking for a pound of flesh and saying, no, he needs to formally apologize. No, that was an apology. Let's keep it real. I'm a progressive. I despise Ted Cruz. Now, okay, we'll get no. We'll have a conversation about it. We'll have a conversation. Okay, so but my favorite excuse was like, my kids, my daughters, they were a little cold, so we decided we just got to go to Ritz-Carlton at Cancun. Wow, well, that must be nice. So, by the way, your daughters maybe had to go to the Ritz-Carlton at Cancun. You didn't have to go. So that's a totally different situation. All right, Kenya, what do you think?
I mean, I think I'm just imagining growing up in Wisconsin, just the number of countries I would have almost automatic dual citizenship with every time we got to leave on account of a snowstorm. I don't think we would actually live in the state. But can you imagine? I think it speaks to something as your tenure as a congressman, your validity as a politician, and then just your overall humanity. When you're looking at when someone can log online and see what a POS trending and immediately think to themselves, oh my gosh, what did Senator Ted Cruz do now? Without even having to know much much of the story. But I mean, with all seriousness, we're talking about a pretty serious situation here where you have folks who are going, out days, weeks without power, without electricity, or without heat, without food. And for that, it just sends the wrong message. And just as much as it sends the wrong message to head off to Cancun at a time when your constituents are suffering, it looks equally pathetic for you to then be cowering and finally acknowledging the state you abandoned by wearing the state flag as your mask as you tried to tiptoe back. It just was an all around bad look.
Yeah, Cenk, I think, look, very few politician apologies are very good. So I think that the bar is set pretty low. If you even approach it, you're gonna be better than most. But I don't think it can be an apology if you do the apology and then you lie about why you had to do the thing you're apologizing for. I don't think it can be an apology if you apologize and then you attack the media as trying to spin it into something negative when it's obviously negative. It has to be negative or you wouldn't be apologizing for it. So if you apologize and then make excuses and lie and try to turn people to be mad at the media or your daughters or whatever, it's not an apology. It's certainly not a good apology.
No, John, of course, right? So look, the core of the lie is not just Ted Cruz, it's shared by every Republican in Texas, let alone the rest of the country. And I want to say this every time we talk about this story. You must understand that it was because of the deregulation of the energy companies. They chose not to insulate their pipes, and that's what caused the debacle. And it could have been mitigated if they were part of the federal energy grid, but they chose not to be. Why? Because of both conservative ideology and crony capitalism and corruption. And so they got paid by those fossil fuel companies. And so the real apology would be Ted Cruz, Greg Abbott, Rick Perry, George W. Bush, all of them coming out and doing a press conference together and saying, we were wrong. We thought not being connected to the rest of the country was a good idea, but it turns out we needed the rest of you. And we're so sorry because now we're asking for federal assistance. And it turns out we did need you. And secondly, we deregulated these energy companies because they gave us campaign contributions, what you colloquially call bribes. And so a lot of you died because of that. We're so sorry. That would be the proper apology. But of course we're not gonna get that. And all I'm saying, John, is that politically, when he does the shrug and saying, and I had to take my daughters to Ritz-Carlton, right? And he says it was a mistake. That actually politically in Republican circles is a mistake because Republicans like dumb, lying alpha dogs. So when he admits it's a mistake, they actually have less respect for him.
Well, I would say especially when the excuse that you come up with is going to evaporate in the next day, when probably the friends who were going with you to Cancun leak the original chat conversations that led to the trip and prove that you needing to go as a chaperone and you needing to go because your daughters came up with a trip, neither of those are actually true. So we found out that group text messages sent by Heidi Cruz, the senator's wife, show that the family's Cancun controversial getaway was a last-minute decision, one that came after she invited other friends in what was an attempt on her part to flee the Cruz's freezing home. She wrote, anyone can or want to leave for the week, we may go to Cancun. The senator's wife also pitched a direct flight and hotels with capacity, seriously, and talked about how it was only a little bit more than $300 a night and has very good security. So apparently it was her idea. And she was going, which provides a parental chaperone if you need one. So his excuse, like as I said on the Damage Report this morning, I admire Ted Cruz for finally not throwing his wife under the bus. But his excuses just aren't true based on what has now been leaked.
Yeah, let alone Snowflake.
Oh, you want to see Snowflake? So what the snowflake that Cenk is referring to there is his dog. Journalist Michael Hardy tweeted this, just drove by Ted Cruz's house in Houston. His lights are off, but a neighbor told me the block had its power back last night. Also, Ted appears to have left behind the family poodle, which is happy because now there's power. By the way, if you look at that picture, if you zoom in, it's the saddest thing. Snowflake's like, where did they all go? It was freezing last night. Now, apparently there was a security guard, but it was basically abandoned.
How could this happen to me?
It looks like Ted Cruz was trying to do a reboot of All Dogs Go to Heaven, but then the power came back on.
Yeah, look, Kenya, my sense is that you could be vicious to human beings in this country and totally get away with it, especially if you're a Republican. But if you mess with a dog, okay, black, white, liberal, conservative, it doesn't matter. People will get very emotional. So when I saw Snowflake trending on Twitter, I thought it was just a reference to Ted Cruz. But it turns out it's his dog. And this is the kind of thing, it is the kind of thing that people will not like. Even Republicans like dogs. So this might be another layer of Ted Cruz's mistake. So overall, Kenya, thoughts on how much lasting damage does this do to Ted Cruz? Is it gonna leave a mark?
I mean, I think we've seen just in the last several weeks the depths of which Ted Cruz is willing to go to look out for Ted Cruz, which is honestly pretty surprising then when you would miss a clear, self-aggrandizing opportunity to just promote yourself, even if for no other reason than to finally look like, a senator capable of getting actionable work done for your constituents, even in the terms of photo ops and opportunities to be in the state, talking with people, talking with your own people who voted for you to at least appear to be working. But I mean, I think this, as we're seeing, there are calls for him to resign. I think we are seeing him take the Donald Trump approach now, which is to assume be a victim here. And even as we saw in the last several weeks, I mean, we watched two senators who ultimately, on account of this action, lost their seats. But we saw two senators, even during the coronavirus pandemic, two Georgia senators profit off of the sale of medical equipment or stock sales related to medical supplies and vaccine distributions. So, it doesn't surprise me the depths to which Republicans are willing to not only profit off of the pain and suffering of American citizens, but then just turn a blind eye to it by essentially hopping to another country, seeking a better life or better opportunity for their children.
Yeah. Cenk, you want to move to a little bit more about Texas?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Hold.
Thank you. So why did it get so bad in Texas? Turns out it's not the frozen windmills. I know, I was as shocked as you that it turned out Fox was lying about that needlessly. No, it turns out that some of the issues with the ability of the energy infrastructure of multiple different forms of electricity generation to weather extreme cold events was a problem that was actually known in advance of these storms. It was actually warned about a decade earlier. And apparently, they just didn't heed those warnings. There's this new report from a 2011 analysis issued by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that said, apparently that federal regulators warned Texas that its power plants couldn't be counted on to reliably churn out electricity in bitterly cold conditions when the last deep freeze plunged 4 million people into the dark. So it was bad back then. It wasn't as bad as most recently, but they recommended that utilities use more insulation, heat pipes, and take other steps to winterize plants. The February 2011 incident occurred when an Arctic cold front descended on the Southwest, sending temperatures below freezing for 4 days in a row. The result was disastrous. Equipment and instruments froze, forcing the shutdown of power plants and rolling blackouts, according to the report. Some of the same equipment, by the way, had failed during previous cold snaps as far back as December 1989, which prompted the state's grid operator to resort to system-wide rolling blackouts for the first time. Now, why, if Texas experienced this in 1989 and experienced it in 2011, and there were warnings about this, why wasn't anything done? Well, apparently, ERCOT officials said that while they have called for companies to harden their facilities against cold, it can't force them to do so, and there are no regulatory penalties if they choose not to weatherize, no matter how many cycles Texas goes through, no matter how many people die when it gets bad. The companies just don't, there's no actual requirement for them to listen to this advice. So once again, not so much the frozen windmills, but deregulation has led to, if the companies are gonna make money by weatherizing, and if they're just gonna be protected when these bad events happen, then why would they willingly decide to do that if there's no penalties for not heeding this advice?
So our own reporter T.Y. Chang just posted about this. We'll put the link down below in the description box on YouTube and Facebook if you're watching there, about how much money flowed into politicians' hands in Texas from those same companies. So this is how our system works. We've legalized bribery, so companies just can bribe politicians and then they'll avoid all regulation and usually avoid most taxes. And so let me break down how this works for you guys. I run a business. I know how you do budgeting. So when a company looks at this, they go, okay, this happened in 1989, it happened in 2011, and now it's happened again. So it happens, a giant horrible winter storm hits Texas at least once a decade, bad enough to kill people. And when it does, by the way, we get to crank up the prices because that was another part of the deregulation. So we're gonna make a killing, didn't mean that, but they did. We're gonna make a lot of money off of this, is what they think, if it happens. But it happens so infrequently, it's not worth insulating our pipelines, which will cost us way more than the money we make once a decade when things freeze. Now, when things freeze, yes, we'll be unprepared on purpose, and we'll have some costs attached to that, but the price increases will make up for that cost. So economically, there's no way that insulating the pipelines will pay for itself. So if the government says, we suggest you do it, the CEOs and the executives will laugh and laugh. Oh, did you? You suggested it? You suggested I should lose $10 million. No, I'm not going to take that. By the way, not lose it as in you're not making money, 10 million less in profits of however much it costs. But and I'm making that number up, but whatever that number is, well, there's another price to it. I mean, the last time I checked, dozens of people had died in Texas. So they're saying, oh, we know you're gonna die. It happened many times before, but it's not worth it to our bottom line to protect your lives like we're supposed to. Now, what the government is supposed to do is not suggest it. They're supposed to say, no, you must protect the people of Texas. If you're gonna provide our energy and we're gonna give you that contract and you're gonna get money from us, it is not optional whether you protect our lives, let alone the energy that heats our homes and gives us other forms of sustenance. So the idea that you deregulate and cross your fingers and hope that corporations do the right thing is absurd on its face. Only someone maniacally stupid or deceitful would believe that.
Well, immediately as soon as I see this and as I see the pattern of when these storms have happened, and someone in the chat is saying that in rural Texas back in 99, 2000, that winter, they were about a week without power. I wonder, are we going to be reporting on the next one? Like in 5 or 6 or 8 years, are we gonna be reporting when they probably still don't heed the advice? And by the way, every 10 years is bad enough, but it is likely that this is gonna get worse and more frequent. On the damage report, we played some videos of explanations of why climate change would result in more intense winter storms in Texas and other parts of the US. So it is likely that not dealing with this crisis and not dealing with the climate crisis could result in a worsening of both.
Yeah.
In any event.
Yeah, so but Kenny, I want to kick it over to you for a second because look, you're in media, of course, we're in media as well, but you're a reporter for The Guardian, and I often blame the mainstream media, and I don't think Guardian's part of mainstream media, but I'm curious about your perspective. So look, there was at least print outlets, including Bloomberg, that had the correct articles on this, right? They explain where the majority of the problem comes from. It comes from fossil fuels and the pipelines of those freezing, et cetera. So that's great, and that's what we love about journalism, right? But when it comes to the national media, there's almost never any accountability. They're happy to talk about Ted Cruz, and that's good, and that's at least some accountability for a politician. But when it comes to the substance, deregulation in this instance clearly caused the problem. Not being connected to the federal energy grid clearly made it worse. But I don't think any of the national media will say, hence, Abbott and Perry and Bush, the governors of Texas, the Republican governors of Texas, were wrong and they should fix it. if history's any guide, they won't fix a damn thing. They'll continue to take the bribes, and the next time they will do the same exact thing as this time, where they'll go, "Oh, nobody could have seen this coming. This was a once in a century storm." I literally saw that from right wingers all over my social media today. Once a century. It just happened 10 years ago, and then before. And it's not just the extreme cold. How about the extreme heat? How about the extreme rain? Houston just got hit a couple of years ago with another once in a century storm. They might be misunderstanding the word century.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely, and what you're seeing once in a century turn into once a decade, perhaps twice a decade, when every single hurricane season, the next hurricane is essentially beating its predecessor in terms of record-breaking storms, record number of death and destruction. I mean, as soon as we're starting to connect those dots more, and you're right, it's a part of it is the media. The fact that we can name Ted Cruz's dog and make the correlation of the irony of it being named Snowflake. But so long as we're paying attention to that, instead of the fact that it is Black and brown communities that are going to be most readily in the dark for weeks to come. Their communities are most likely to have their power, or least likely to have their power restored in the early days of service. And then if we're failing to connect the dots here in terms of what politicians at the state and local level were having campaign contributions that we know to be bribes or other forms of corruption on account of this deregulation that took essentially an entire state off of a federal system that could have prevented this very disaster. Until we start connecting those dots of climate change, climate policy, and how it's impacting the very communities that live in Texas today, that are still searching for food today, that are still boiling their water today. Until we make that correlation, we'll see these episodes continue for every 10 years to come. Call it it might as well be the census or a leap year every 4 years. We'll see soon.
Yeah, in fact, I want to build off that real quick because this is our reporting that just came out from TYT Investigates. So Midland Energy is one of the companies involved here. They are the single largest donor to Governor Abbott. They are the single largest donor to Governor Perry. So every real person, including every Republican, knows that when you take millions of dollars from these companies, they're not doing it for health or charity. They're doing it to buy Greg Abbott and Rick Perry, and they did. So then Abbott and Perry say, don't worry about insulating it. We'll do a suggestion, right? And then you guys will you give me a couple $1 million and you'll get to save 10 or $20 million. And later, my citizens will die, but don't sweat it. We're all making money. So let me give you more of that money. Quoting Tiwa Chang, our reporter here. And then Midland's founder is Saeed Javid Anwar. And he was, of course, friends with George W. Bush, also former governor of Texas. And apparently Bush calls him J Daddy. Okay, how is that for telling? And anyway, in 2018, Anwar reportedly had donated more than $1.7 million to Texas Republicans. And Abbott got more than $1 million of that, including both cash and airplane rides. So, and it goes on and on. Please read the story. We have the link down in the description box for you guys. So you can see it is very, very, very direct. The companies involved paid Abbott and the rest of the Texas Republicans millions of dollars to make sure that they could profit off of you, but not protect you. And so I'm just asking all the national media to do the bare minimum and report facts about the donors. If you're telling me it's not bribes, honestly, you should retire from journalism because you're not a journalist. Oh yeah, no, Abbott is so honorable, and the $1 million that he took was to help the people of Texas, and then coincidentally he decided that Midland should not have extra costs that they would need to protect you. Come on, then you're not a journalist. Go home, be a plumber, be a dentist, do something else.
And it follows even long after we've been talking about these campaign contributions. It extends even now as we'll see soon the federal government step in with FEMA relief aid, with FEMA relief loans for small businesses. And even we'll see some of these big corporations attempt to take tax write-offs on account of the sheer destruction that this disaster, this storm caused. When you're when you're in one element wanting to deregulate the government and saying you're going to be the very cause of this disaster on account of wanting to escape the government, to then come back around and say we want this federal assistance and being able to maintain our profits or expand our profits long after this recovery. I mean, that accountability continues long after into as these investigations continue, or even as we see moving forward, what we're even predicting as what we'll see in the couple years, having
Kenya, yeah, your screen went black. Mine did too.
We can still hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. That's what I was wondering, if you guys can hear me. I'll just keep talking. But in terms of what we'll see to be in the years to come, efforts to prevent or even try to modernize these facilities and fossil fuel industries moving forward.
Yeah. There's no truth to the rumor that Midland is also controlling Kenya's screen.
It's all a conspiracy.
Yeah. No, to be fair to J Daddy, he didn't do that one. Okay, John, you want to take a break and come back with more news?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, that sounds great. Guys, we have more updates on this. Some of you wrote in already saying, hey, did you guys know that they're now making tremendous money off of this? The same energy companies that caused the disaster in the first place? Yes, we have that later in the program. So come right back. All right, back during the break. Let me go to the members' comments right away. Leroy, not Jenkins, spelled with a C, wrote in, I would have to say that my favorite part of the power panel overall is the theme music with the added TYT chant. Hits hard. Thank you, Leroy, I appreciate it. We like to hit hard. John Campbell Reese writes in, I bet many poor people freezing their backsides off in Texas would like to be like Ted Cruz and his family and just be able to drop everything and head to Cancun. Yes, and by the way, last minute tickets cost a lot. They're on and on and on, right? Must be nice. Stiff upper lib writes in, hot darn, AOC owns Ted Cruz. He flies off to Cancun. She raises $2 million for Texas. That's called, what is it called? Oh, that's right, scoreboard. Now people say, oh, that's insensitive. She raised $2 million to help people. Ted Cruz raised $20,000 to go on a trip to Cancun for himself. Anyway, Diana writes in, here's a concept for you, Can Cruz. Take your daughters to volunteer at a shelter. It's such a great point. Diana, you're awesome. Like, it never even occurs to him, like, maybe I should teach my daughters like that I could, there's a good moment where they could help people instead of like, Daddy, can we just like kind of leave the poor people behind and go to the Ritz-Carlton? I'm not putting it on the daughters. It wasn't even their idea, okay? So sorry about the accent. It was actually Heidi Cruz's idea, according to the text. So, and the parents are not being good role models here. Rainbow Bright says, Cruz won't wear a mask here, but was willing to follow mask mandates in Cancun. It is kind of.
I mean, it's entirely possible that they actually require it.
Well,
like,
how is that?
Just be like, I'm a senator, I don't have to. Here, you can get away with that.
Yeah. Here, it's more like I'm an idiot and I don't have to, which is the same excuse that the energy companies had, except they're not stupid, they're greedy. All right, here we go. Thank you to Gaza Girl Seeker and Chad Christopher, who hit the join button below on YouTube and just became Young Turks members. Look, everything we do, whether it's change from in terms of the candidates, getting the progressive message out, is because of you guys. So you should feel fantastic about the change you're bringing to the world. Starla Herrick and Doug Kingsbury just upgraded, also using the join button below. We appreciate that deeply. If you're watching anywhere else, tyt.com/join. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, John, and Kenya with you guys. John, go.
Okay. Unfortunately, throughout this week, President Joe Biden has been steadily seeming to backtrack, both in public at his town hall this week and in private in conversations about their path and the timeline for canceling student loan debt. He's been vocally in support of $10,000 of cancellation, although politicians from progressives like AOC to Chuck Schumer himself have been saying he should cancel $50,000, that he should do it immediately through an executive order. He doesn't seem willing to do any of those things. He doesn't think that he has the legal authority to cancel $50,000, but he also announced this week that the $10,000 wouldn't be done via executive order. So I don't even know what the legal authority thing has to do with anything, since they'd be doing it through legislation that would also just be filibustered. So there's a lot of issues there. But what do people actually think? Well, Data for Progress did a poll and found very broad support for cancellation. They found 54% of likely voters think Biden should use his executive authority to cancel $50,000 in student debt, compared to just 37% who said he should not forgive that debt. But very importantly, since the numbers that are generally thrown around are 10,000 or 50,000, you should also know that according to this study, using a randomized test where voters were either asked about 10,000 or 50,000, Data for Progress did not find any evidence that 50,000 of cancellation would be less popular. It's not a thing where people just happen to be okay with a little bit of cancellation, but once the number goes up, they're suddenly against it. That is not what they found. And we have additional numbers on who has debt, how much they have, but initially it is a popular position, and also coincidentally one that he has promised he would do. Thoughts?
Yeah, Kenya, one of the excuses they use is, well, look, this is gonna help rich people too much. Yeah, that's the main problem with the proposal. Anyway, before I get into my opinions, what's your take on that excuse?
I think this is a part of a number of concerning dial backs that even in some of the conversations I had with folks back in Milwaukee, where President Joe Biden had his town hall earlier this week, a number of Black voters who are essential in landing Biden the victory for winning back the White House. It was a concern not only in what we're hearing are the discrepancies about whether voters can expect to receive another $2,000 or $1,400, or whether there actually will be an increase in the federal minimum wage. These are issues that the Biden administration has listed as core to their priorities, which are addressing racial inequities within the institutions of the government. And if you're acknowledging what what we're even seeing Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and others acknowledge are core elements of those racial inequities that are being made worse by a coronavirus pandemic that's disproportionately impacting these communities, what you're going to see is that these these type of policies are largely in support or largely supported by Black communities, Black voters. Because if we're looking specifically even at student loans, it's Black women who have a disproportionate amount of student loan debt who stand to benefit from this type of executive order or legislation, especially if we're talking about upwards of $50,000. But when you have a president who is as immediately as we're talking about the power of change, the unprecedented moment and how it was an urgency or righteous anger, as I spoke with some others who spoke of the moment of the time, just as quickly as you're seeing what can't be done, what might not be feasible, what will require unity, which on account of unity might therefore require a lack of accountability. When you're hearing these messages from a president who acknowledged that he needed this voting bloc's vote, that he needed the support of Black Americans, this becomes problematic when you're hearing the very policies that could impact you immediately be the ones that are subject to being ripped off the table.
Yeah. And Jake, you were talking about the argument that this would just be for rich people, or sometimes it's formulated as we just don't want to cancel the debt for people who went to Harvard, like as if only rich people go to Harvard. Like if you're lucky enough to get to go to Harvard, well, screw you. You should have chosen a less prestigious school, I guess. Well, apparently, passage of the $50,000 debt cancellation proposal would mean, quote, nearly 85% of young borrowers in the poorest communities would become free of student debt. This crisis is the culmination of waning government funding for higher education, wage stagnation, wealth inequality, and a misleading emphasis on obtaining high credentials, all leading to the financial gap between college prices and later earnings. That is according to this report, Student Debt in Young America. And they found that the number of borrowers is going up, the number of loans each borrower takes out is going up, the amount of each one of those loans is going up. And so you can see that in 2019, 18 to 35-year-olds with student loan debt owed nearly $35,000 on average, compared to just $28,000 a decade earlier. And in 2009, there were 32 million federal borrowers. A decade later, that had jumped up to 43 million. And they have other numbers having to do with the racial inequity in student loan debt, both average and mean as well. But the arguments that Biden has been making or his team have been making just don't make sense. The legal argument, the political path forward, even the justification for another round of hyper targeting of benefits that always seems to just delay and sometimes cancel the policy being proposed fully anyway. So the numbers just don't bear out what he's been saying, as thankfully some politicians like AOC have been pointing out throughout the week.
Yeah, so there's two different issues here. One is how are you going to substantively handle this? And I actually think that's complicated. So one of the things I would look at if I was doing this policy is, and of course thoughtful legislators have looked at this, is all right, public schools versus private schools. Because if we are going to do free college for public schools, which I think we should do, and I think it's really important, college for all, well, then it makes a lot of sense to make sure that you cancel the debt of the people who went to public schools earlier. And that's an issue of fairness and equity, et cetera, right? Yes, the amount of money that you forgive is potentially an issue. And there are other issues to grapple with. How about the folks who paid off their debt before? So we can work through these issues, but we all have to at least agree on facts. We're supposed to be past the Trump world. So if you hear a so-called centrist Democrat, who I would call a corporate Democrat, and yes, that includes Joe Biden, tell you that doing $50,000 is less popular, is just not true. We just gave you the facts. There's no question that it's not true. Okay, so that's point number one. Point two, if you say, well, it becomes politically problematic if you relieve that much debt. We could do 10,000, but not 50,000. Well, again, the numbers don't bear that out. The 50,000 is actually more popular. But second of all, politically speaking, 10,000 is good. People will feel that. That's a giant amount of money. But 50,000 liberates millions of Americans, liberates them. They don't have any debt. Most of them will not have any student debt anymore because the average student debt's 35,000. And then they are free to take any job they want. And just the psychological relief of that, let alone the economic impact of the extra spending power they have, will be awesome. So if they say, hey, that's not doable because of those reasons, that is also definitively not true. Politically, it would definitely help. So then if you're wondering, well, look, I'm a good Democrat and I kind of like Biden and Pelosi and stuff. So Why are they doing this though? There must be a legitimate reason. Well, partly they've bought into this mythology of when Republicans get in, they spend like drunk sailors and give trillions of dollars of tax cuts to the rich. And when Democrats come in, they have to clean up the mess and be fiscally responsible and never add to the deficit, et cetera. I think Biden has internalized that. The other reason, keeping it real, is giant donors. And you say, wait a minute, what's the donor angle here? It's mainly the government that has this loan, right? The angle is, if you do $1.6 trillion in student debt relief, you won't have money left over to do $1.6 trillion in tax cuts. So that's why Trump did $1.9 trillion of tax cuts and zero relief, whether it was student debt or healthcare or any of those issues. So if you think that politicians that are Democratic don't take millions of dollars in campaign donations in any account, well, you're just not correct. They're not angels, they're human beings. And like Professor Larry Lessig says, ironically at Harvard, they lean to the green. So that's what's happening here. Because the other arguments for not doing bigger relief don't hold water. And one last one here. Usually they hide behind, I gotta tell Senate tradition and technical rules about reconciliation, and I got a parliamentarian and all this nonsense. And golly gee, Manchin and Sinema won't say yes. This one you could do through executive order. So honestly, Biden has nowhere to hide on this one.
It looks like we should probably break, and then we can move back and talk about the voting reforms in Florida.
Yeah, and guys, it's super important. They steal elections from you ahead of time. Trump was the idiot who tried to do it afterwards, right? So we got to fill you in on how they do that and so much more. So stay right here. And by the way, like and share the stream. Let's get this progressive message out to more and more people. We'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks. I was going to say post game, no, mid game in a sense. During the break here, I read your comments. So let's go to our members section, tyt.com/join to become a member on our website. You get all of our programming, including the post game we're going to do today. Kim McLaughlin writes in, American taxpayers will pay to repair electrical grids, their generators, and the water system. So they get the triple dip. 1, save money by refusing to upgrade. 2, charge customers exorbitant prices when the supply drops. And 3, have the federal government pay to repair everything. Now, I'm gonna make a note to the folks who are put these comments on and off so that I could read them. Don't take Kim's comment off. That comment is so good. I'm gonna come back to it when we do the story about the energy companies profiting off of this. Kim, I wish I'd said that earlier. I love how smart our audience is. That's exactly right. Honestly, I forgot about the first point you're making, which is that we're gonna have to pay for the upgrades. So it's not a double dip, it's a triple dip, you're right. Okay, toss a coin to your progressive candidate, says, Democrats' government strategy is utterly baffling. Quote, we won, now we need to back away from our policies. You won because people preferred those policies. If you pursue them, hey, maybe you'll continue winning. It's so obvious, and yet that's why I get so frustrated with the media. Everybody in Washington media is like, oh no, when a Democrat wins, they should immediately renege on all of their policies. That's smart politics. No, it's the dumbest politics you could possibly imagine. Republicans never do it. Gabby Marita says, student debt is one of those dystopian terms that only Americans have to comprehend and deal with, while the rest of the world is super confused at us about. See also medical bankruptcy, school shootings, for-profit prisons, and Florida. It's true though, those are all uniquely American terms that are baffling to any other country. So I'm a Catwoman says, what no one ever mentions, the poor people often have to go to more expensive colleges, not Harvard, in order to continue working and providing for families. Poor people pay more for everything, including college. Now, I'm gonna add to that. On top of that, it's a much bigger percentage of their wealth and their income. So that's a giant relief to poor people. All right, we're gonna come right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, John, and Kenya with you guys. So we got a lot more stories for you guys. John, keep on rolling.
Let's do it. Earlier today, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, announced that despite the fact that the election went quite smoothly in Florida, was very secure, everything seemed to go okay outside of right-wing rhetoric, they're going to be making a number of changes to election law in Florida. That's the plan. So among the things that he's interested in, he wants more election observers. He wants lawmakers when they convene in March to bolster the vote by mail signature verification process and to not shut out Florida political parties and candidates from observing the voter signature matching process. He wants more restrictions on vote by mail, and he hopes that the legislature will address ballot harvesting in the state as to not allow individuals to submit other people's vote by mail ballots unless they are immediate family, despite seemingly any evidence that that led to literally any fraud, even anecdotally. He wants restrictions on organizations that boost voter turnout, because why not? Other proposals would prohibit counties from accepting financial help from private organizations for Get Out the Vote initiatives, require election supervisors to post overvote ballots for the canvassing board to consider, and real-time reporting of voter turnout data. And finally, he had this to say: we need to make sure that our citizens have confidence in the elections, that they have the ability to vote. We want, obviously, everyone to vote, but we don't want anyone to cheat. And we want to make sure that we strike that appropriate balance. And so we're gonna go a little bit broader than Florida in a bit, but he's not gonna let a successful, secure election stop him from making it harder for as many people, Democrats, to vote in the future.
Kenya, have you ever seen in American history before maybe suppressing the votes of a certain group of people to try to get right wingers who are opposed to that group elected? I'm sure this must be a new concept.
I mean, oh my gosh, this has to be breaking. I can't imagine what could have possibly been done in what will be the 245-year history of this country. But as Maya Angelou tells us so often, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. This has to be the umpteenth time, or perhaps the 245th year. But what we see is this is, even in the state of Florida, this is nothing new. Just several years ago, we saw the Republican Party institute a state bill that dialed back Amendment 4, which would a local or statewide would have restored the voting rights of returning citizens or those who were formerly incarcerated with felonies. I mean, we see that so long as there is a demographic, a voting bloc that once you are bestowing them with voting rights, they can potentially benefit Democratic candidates or progressive movements. We see these efforts to dial back. We see these efforts to speak to dog whistles, which DeSantis is doing quite readily, and speaking to wanting to count every vote or count every legal vote, survey the process or somehow reach a balance of cheating and enfranchising voters. I don't know where you reach a balance of cheating and not cheating, but we've seen this before, and this is all a part of Republican efforts to stifle Democratic momentum and grassroots momentum in progressive movements across the state.
Yeah. And guys, the Republicans have looked into this dozens of times, and they're desperate to find voter fraud, and they just cannot find it. Trump did a commission, and it was headed by Chris Kobach, one of the most right-wing people in the whole country, and they had to shut down the commission because they couldn't find any evidence of voter fraud. And then Kobach did this hilarious thing where he had to go back like 70 years and found like 30 cases, something like that. And then people did the math on it. It was like 0.00006% was voter fraud. It was comically low. When in reality, when they do these things that make it harder to vote, it disenfranchises millions of voters. So that is not a correct balancing act. So by the way, just think about it. Do progressives want there to be voter fraud in elections? Hell no. Our opponents would do it first, and almost every time. Republicans would do it first through 100th, and corporate Democrats would do it next. We're the last people on earth that want voter fraud in elections. But number one, good news, it doesn't really exist. Number two is that we're not going to sacrifice the votes of millions of people that are usually, by the way, African Americans, Democrats, students, young people, poor people, people that live in cities and hence don't have driver's licenses, and on it goes. This has always been a lie. And the press has begun to turn a little bit on the issue of climate change. And they used to present it as 50-50 for decades. And now they're beginning to say most of the world's scientists agree that climate change is real. The real number is 99%. They should, on this issue, they should do the same thing. Every person that has ever looked into this, I don't want, like whether it's a professor or let's put it this way, every study that has ever looked at this, including Republican studies, say that voter fraud is nearly non-existent, whereas disenfranchising millions of people is definitely happening.
Yeah, and not just in Florida, as we've been talking about both on the Young Turks and on the Damage Report. This has become very widespread since the election. So far, at least 28 different states, I think it's actually up to 33, have introduced, pre-filed, or are advancing 106 restrictive bills for the 2021 legislative session, according to a report from the Brennan Center for Justice. So now, this is very heavily weighted towards just a few states. Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan have dozens of bills just for those states. Oddly enough, they were states that the Democrats won. Weird how that works out. But understand that while a lot of this is at the state level, in theory, really restrictive voting legislation could be appealed in the courts, but inevitably it will now hit a conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court that is unlikely to change no matter what Biden wants during the next 4 to 8 years. And the Democrats do have a couple of bills that are pending that would protect voting rights, but they also have literally zero chance of passing unless the Democrats kill the filibuster, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. So their conservatives have now gotten in all of the defense they need in the judiciary, and the Democrats are effectively disarming themselves from fighting back because they don't want to get rid of this tradition, or Joe Manchin's just not into it, or Kristen Sinema something. I don't know, but it's or they're crooks. Yeah, it's a very dark future for voting rights if the Democrats continue to let the Republicans do whatever they want and they don't take it seriously as a priority for them.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to get confused. Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema couldn't care less about Senate tradition, and they protect the filibuster for what? Let me give you 2 quick facts about that because it's so important to every one of these issues. For between 1917 and 1970, the filibuster was used less than once a year. Once Obama became president, it went up to over 80 times a year because the Republicans blocked every single thing that Obama did, and they have already begun to block every single thing that Biden is doing. It is not tradition. And by the way, those 49 times they used it pre-Obama, almost every time it was to block civil rights, including anti-lynching laws. So the great tradition that Joe Manchin is protecting was to protect the right of Southerners to lynch black people. Keep it real. That's a fact, and you can go ahead and look that up.
We're also saying this is attempting to keep the tradition of essentially dialing back the immediate aggressiveness that Democrats promise every time they take over a Senate, they take over a Congress, or anything. We see, I mean, we saw Senate majorities under an Obama administration, later on a Trump administration. As soon as there's this transfer of power, as soon as we see this flip of power or the control of power, see is Democrats dialing back on the very aggressiveness that they say they're going to have. When we have a majority, we're going to push through some of the legislation. We're not going to be the party of obstructionism like we saw from Republican counterparts. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to push through policies that are leaning more toward the left because we have this power now, because we control both houses, because we have the White House, because we have this power. And then as soon as they have the opportunity to exercise that power, even similarly to what we're hearing now, it's the exercising of unity, which almost sounds like laying down and continuing to allow Republicans to get their way.
Definitely. Cenk, you want to move on to our last topic?
Yeah, look, I want to say 1,000 other things about that, but let's do the next topic.
Yeah. Don't worry. They're gonna do more legislation like this. We'll have chances to talk about it. Okay, let's move on to this. Representative Ro Khanna has a new piece of legislation designed to fix a problem that has often been talked about over the past few years, but not much has actually been done, and that is the gradual defunding of the IRS that just happens coincidentally to have the effect of fewer audits of the rich and corporations happening. He has a bill that calls for an additional $100 billion in funding for the IRS over the course of the next decade, with 70 billion of that money going to enforcement. The bill would require the IRS to use the additional enforcement funds to increase audits of the wealthy and corporations, requiring the agency to meet targets of auditing 95% of corporations with more than $20 billion in assets, 50% of individual tax returns with income of more than $10 million, 33% of individual tax returns with income between 5 and 10 million, and lower thresholds below that. It would also increase penalties for millionaires who falsify their tax returns to pay less than they owe. And Ro Khanna has said that he estimates, and this is driven by data provided by people like former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, University of Pennsylvania law professor Natasha Sarin, and former IRS Commissioner Charles Versati, that it would generate something like $1.2 trillion in federal revenue over a decade without requiring a single dollar of tax increases. And for that reason, I imagine it is going to have a very hard path to getting passed.
So two things about this. Number one, the IRS has been systematically defunded. They won't defund the police, but they'll defund the IRS. Why? Because that's $1.2 trillion that rich people are cheating on their taxes. And guess who funds politicians? Rich people. So our system is insane. We allow for private financing of elections. So of course, rich people just buy all the politicians. Why? Because they're about to save $1.2 trillion on the cheating alone, let alone the tax cuts, which saves them further trillions of dollars. So now point number two is the excuse that they'll make is, oh my God, look at these no good libs. They want to spend $100 billion on the IRS. The IRS is evil and they're gonna waste all this money. The part they don't tell you is we're gonna get $1.2 trillion back. And it's going to be almost all exclusively A, from rich people, and B, 100% from people who were cheating on their taxes. So, and guys, I just think about it. If somebody said to you, give me $100, you might say, well, I don't know, what am I getting, right? And it's an open question, $100 is a lot. If somebody said to you, okay, give me the $100 and I'm gonna give you $1,200 back, would you do it? Of course! And that's the question Ro Khanna is asking you. And all Republicans will say no. They'll pretend you're just giving the $100, and they won't mention that you're getting the $1,200 back. Kenya.
I mean, yeah, I have about as much faith in this bill as I usually do when I hear law enforcement agencies say that they're launching investigations into their own misconduct. I mean, when you have such a correlation between, keeping taxes for the wealthy low, keeping the IRS against these or off these very politicians these very wealthy donors, oftentimes donors to both parties, when you have incentive to keep the IRS off of these individuals who later donate to your campaigns, sustain your campaigns. I mean, we're not necessarily going to see this go far. But what I do think we're even seeing is, there's a recognition here. The IRS even acknowledges they don't have the personnel, they don't have the resources, they don't have the funding to go after these billionaires or trillionaires as we're seeing now. And so it's easier for them to go after the low-hanging fruit, those who maybe have had an error on their taxes, or lower income individuals who are easier to audit. And so when you're exacerbating these disparities, and when the Biden administration is saying that these are racial inequities that we want to tackle right away, I'm not necessarily surprised by this legislation or seeing this effort to address these disparities where they are, but I won't necessarily be surprised after that once we again see another dial back of this effort.
And one more time though, I want to give credit to the good progressives that are putting this forward. At least somebody's fighting for you. Ro Khanna is the first Justice Democrat ever. He's never taken corporate PAC money, and look at that, he doesn't serve corporations, he serves you. Funny how that worked out. So support, by the way, there are now a couple of Republican politicians who don't take corporate PAC money either. So if you're a conservative and you want to support them, I get it. I'm gonna disagree with you on the policy, but at least support honest politicians who, and for Republican voters, you definitely have different priorities than I do. But at least those guys not taking the corporate PAC money are in some ways serving you. And for progressives that aren't taking corporate PAC money, they're serving all of us. That would be $1.2 trillion that could pay off almost all the student debt in the country. That can get us healthcare, that can get us so many wonderful things if we just stop letting the rich cheat on their taxes.
I think that's all the time we have, Cenk.
Yep. Kenya Evelyn from Guardian USA, thank you so much. You were amazing. Yeah. And John, everybody check out the damage report. Everybody knows what's happening. Dragons are circling the internet and breathing fire online. You all know it. So check out the damage report. When we come back, we've got another great set of hosts for you guys. Ben Dixon's gonna lead. I love that. And Helen Hong is back. So nothing but fun. And we're gonna talk about how the energy companies are now profiting off of your misery in Texas. We'll be right back.
Can you name the representative of your district?
The representative of my district, oof.
I have no idea.
I actually don't know who the representative of my district is.
Do you know what the corporate tax rate is?
I think it's pretty high. I should know this.
Like in between 20, 25%. I don't know.
How many amendments are in the US Constitution?
Oh no.
This brings me back to grade school.
I should know this because I was a history major, but I do not remember.
I don't know that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Nope. I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know? I didn't know. It's time to change that. We live in the best country in the world. We live in the most powerful country in the world. We love our American freedom, but only half of us take part in the political process. Only half of us vote. We don't fulfill our duties as US citizens to make this country a better place. It's time that we use our voices as a team, as a country, to become better. We will stand up. We will be empowered. We will stay educated and informed about politics every single day because it's our responsibility. And Politiscope just made it easy for you. So join me, join us, and let's be Americans.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for that to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse us and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for, if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com. It's a fun Friday. Things drop like this. Power panel, hour 2. Benjamin Dixon of the famed Benjamin Dixon Show, and Helen Hong of many things, including Silicon Valley, where I'm thrilled to see her every time. Helen, you're so funny in that show.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to do it. Mike Judge is a literal genius, and it was super fun. And I'm glad you saw it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it now. I'm in the final season of Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah. And the way you trick all the folks into doing what you want, it's every part of it is hilarious.
Thank you.
Helen, you might also recognize from Wait, Don't Tell Me. And she's got 2 podcasts because she's a hardworking woman. Jobsolete and Go Fact Yourself. So that's when I saw Go Fact Yourself, I'm like, that's so Helen Hong.
And you can say it, you could say it different ways. Like on a bad day, you could be like, go fact yourself. You can make it your own.
No, I'm running with it. Now I'm thinking of all the different variations, right? Backed off.
I'm wearing my American t-shirt today because apparently a lot of people don't know that you can be Asian and American at the same time. And I am here to rep that. Asian and American at the same time, kids.
So Helen, my family's been dealing with that in 18 different ways for a long time. So one, my wife is Asian, so we've had to deal with that recently. And 2, of course, I grew up Muslim. So we've been trying to convince people we're American for a long time. So I don't know if a big percentage of the country's buying it, but I guess that's their problem. All right, anyways, we got tons of stories for you guys. So Ben, take it away.
Yeah, so Cenk, while most of Texas is reeling from this winter storm, it's not actually bad news for everyone. Comstock Resources Incorporated, which is owned by billionaire Jerry Jones, also owner of the Dallas Cowboys, they have been celebrating a surge in their pricing, their ability to raise prices during this crisis for most Texans. I want to read a quote for you from Barstool Sports. This week, and this is a quote from Roland Burns, who's the CEO of the company. He said, "This week is like hitting the jackpot with some of these incredible prices." The chief financial officer, Roland Burns, said on the earnings call Wednesday via Bloomberg, "Frankly, we were able to sell at super premium prices for a material amount of production." They went on to say, "That seems good news for Jones, who 2 years ago had a total investment of 1.1 billion in Comstock. His oil and gas company has become the leading producer in one of the nation's largest natural gas basins." And so what we're facing in Texas is the standard price gouging. Generally speaking, price gouging is illegal, especially when states of emergencies have been declared, but that doesn't seem to deter these companies like hotels in Austin, Texas, also jumping in on the price gouging. We saw earlier this week the Ramada Inn in Austin, Texas, charging upwards of $1,000 per night. But in this case, there are homeowners and renters who are facing tens of thousands of dollars in gas bills as a result of the price gouging that's taking place in Texas. Now, of course, to me, this is just representative of what happens in our system. We have a system that is built on people being able to take advantage of the least of these, or people who are in crisis, people who are in distress. And whereas most of us look at this as something where we want to reach out and help our neighbors, for Jerry Jones and his company, this is their opportunity to get as much as they can from the people who are suffering. Some have died, many are burning furniture, many are doing everything they possibly can to survive. And this is quite literally the best of times and worst of times for the people of Texas. The worst of times, obviously, for the common person in Texas, but the best of times for these organizations and these corporations that are able to charge these exorbitant prices. I'm curious, Cenk, what you think in terms of the likelihood that anyone will be held accountable for what is clearly price gouging.
Yeah, no, they will not only not be held accountable. In this case, price gouging was actually built into the system. So I'm gonna explain that in a second. By the way, but I did not know the Ramada Inn prices, Ben, that you just said. And that actually makes Heidi Cruz's logic at least more sensible, not for Ted Cruz, but for the rest of the family. She was telling friends in those leaked texts, you look, the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun is like $300 a night. And it turns out if they wanted to go to the Ramada Inn, in Texas, it's $1,000 a night. So that's why they wanted to go to Cancun. So it's not the right way to handle it, by the way. It's not to say, oh, okay, great, and let them have Ritz-Carlton. No, don't let the Ramada Inn price gouge. So
you know that your corporate policy is crap when you're making Ted Cruz look better.
Right.
I mean, you know the Ramada Inn is like a POS when you're like, oh, Ted Cruz, I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the new slogan for Ted is "Yes, we can Cruz." Hey, so now onto the price gouging. This is really important. The way that the Republicans built the legal system that applies to the energy companies in Texas is they allowed for flexible pricing. That sounds good, right? Oh, it's how we want them to be flexible. Flexible is good, right? No, that means yes, when demand is low and supply is high, you will get charged less, okay? But in Texas, the demand is often high, especially in the summer where it is very, very hot. And so when demand gets high, and especially if supply is low, like now, like when the pipes freeze, that means that the prices go through the roof. That is not the bug, that's the feature. So the companies told the Republicans, we want to be able to price gouge in extreme weather circumstances, because that way we'll be able to make more money. And the Republicans said, I hear what you're saying, where's my check? And those energy companies said, oh, here it is. So our own TYT investigates a story out today about how one of the companies, Midland in that case, is the biggest donor to Greg Abbott, the governor. And then Abbott let them set their own rules where they make all the money and we all get screwed and some of us die. Wow, how shocking. That same energy company gave so much money to George W. Bush. He used to call their CEO J Daddy, okay? And they also gave to Rick Perry. They've given millions to Texas Republicans. So now one of the rules they set was let us price gouge, and they got built into the law, okay? The second was don't let any federal energy come in here because we want a monopoly. And then they painted that as, free, Texas, man, we're independent. We don't need the rest of the country. Texas strong, right? Now people are saying Texas strong in the right way, like let's just please try to survive with our lives as we have to weather this storm. But before they used it as an excuse to rob you blind. And the third way they said was deregulate. So all safety measures that they would take were then just turned into suggestions and not mandatory. And you're gonna be shocked to find out that none of those companies took any of those safety precautions. They ignored those suggestions because it cost them money. So they're like, thank you very much. I pay you the bribe, you give me whatever I want. And then later, we'll have the people of Texas pay for it. And both with their lives, and then eventually the money it takes to repair all the damage that's done.
Right. I just can't believe, like, wasn't there a point at which if you were a disgusting, rampant capitalist that you at least tried to pretend like you had some humanity? You'd be, oh no, this is terrible. And wow, this is really god awful. No, these guys are fully like, we hit the jackpot. Ding, 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 ding. Like they're just openly saying, and the quote that you said was, we've hit the jackpot. I mean, people are literally freezing to death. There are mothers who are in cars risking carbon and monoxide poisoning for their children to stay warm. And these guys are in a room like, jackpot.
Yeah, and that's the part, like it's the greatest irony to me that this guy's name is Mr. Burns, right? For anyone who grew up on The Simpsons, like this is quite literally the quintessential example of greed and excess capitalism. Like he's sitting there like Smithers, like he's really super excited about the fact that while Texans are dying, right, they're able to jack up the prices with no remorse. But I think it's quite indicative of how this system is designed to work this way, but also to implode on itself, because I think the question really is how long will the people put up with this? Because according to Mr. Burns, he has no fear whatsoever of the people of Texas looking at him and running him at a minimum, running him out of the state. Because as he's celebrating, there are people who are literally going to have to, sell their homes or pawn off things just to pay the bill that they have accrued because they've hit the jackpot.
So Ben and Helen, number one, the reason why they're brazen about it is because they've really captured the two sources of power in this country. One is the media. So the media used to be watchdogs, and they used to hound the powerful. It was a long time ago, at least 50 years ago. Now they basically serve the powerful. So will the media hold accountable the energy companies and the Republican politicians that made this crooked deal? Like we did, and we'll put the link to the article in the description box below. You could read it for yourself. Will they link the money and campaign contributions to the decisions that the politicians made? No, they won't, because they'll think, oh my God, that is the honorable Greg Abbott. I cannot suggest that perhaps the $1 million that he got might have affected his decisions. Of course it affected his decisions. And if you don't think that, you're not a journalist, you're just a servant of the powerful. So capturing the media, because now almost all the mainstream medias are all multi-billion-dollar corporations themselves, who take advertising from other multi-billion-dollar corporations, including energy companies. So that was a huge part of the puzzle. The second part of the puzzle was just we legalized price gouging in Texas, as we just explained, but more importantly, we legalized bribery when the Supreme Court said corporations can give money to politicians. And then they said they can give unlimited money to politicians, and democracy was over. So that's why there's not gonna be any accountability in Texas. The next storm, you guys are gonna die again. And again, the media is going to pretend that oh golly gee, nobody could have seen this coming, and it's going to go round and round, and the Republicans are going to help corporations rob you. And by the way, corporate Democrats too.
Yeah.
Each time. And the other way to read the story, by the way, is TYT.com. I'm really proud of the story. It's a great story. Make sure you check it out. Now, I want to give the last word to one of our viewers. So our viewers write in during the show, and Kim McLaughlin made such a great point earlier in the show that I want to reshare it with you. It's perfect for this story. And I love having the smartest audience in the world. TYT.com/join to become a member. All right, so Kim wrote in, American taxpayers will pay to repair electrical grids, their generators, and the water systems. So these companies got the triple dip. 1, save money by refusing to upgrade. 2, charge customers exorbitant prices when supply drops. And 3, have the federal government pay to repair everything. That is exactly right. And that's exactly how they rob us.
Yeah. And it is a depressing scenario, Cenk, that this is what we're facing, and it repeats itself time and time and time again. We're also looking at another depressing. I hate to be the bearer of bad news today. I should have picked more stories that were not like this serious, but this next one is really depressing. And it is about the fact that life expectancy in the United States has decreased for the first time. The average US life expectancy dropped by a complete year in 2020, in the first half of 2020, according to a new report from the National Center of Health Statistics. Life expectancy at birth for the total US population was 77.8 years, a decline of 1 year from 78.8 in 2019. Deaths from COVID-19 are the main factor in the overall drop in US life expectancy between January and June of 2020, according to the CDC. Also, drug overdose is included in that. But the group that suffered the greatest was Black men, whereas the average life expectancy decreased by 1 year. For Black men, the average life expectancy decreased by 3 years. And so we've seen time and again that whereas Americans may be suffering, there are groups that suffer even more. And in this case, it's my direct demographic. And it is a result of COVID-19, but it's also a result of all of the systemic factors that play into health disparities in this country. But here we are in a nation, the wealthiest nation on the face of the planet. And yet again, we're demonstrating that we may be best viewed as a failed state. Cenk.
Yeah, so we have the usual culprits here. First of all, Trump and the Republicans basically minimized this, said it was no big deal in terms of coronavirus and the pandemic, and look at how hard it's hit us. I mean, there's a lot of different factors here. It's not just coronavirus, but it's taken a year off our lives. And then number 2 is all the corporate politicians, including maybe most guilty is the corporate Democrats. What do we need? Universal health care? Nah, everybody will be fine without universal health care. Let's let tens of millions of Americans have no health care at all. Let them die in the streets. And so why should we be surprised that our life expectancy is going down? Now, is it going down in developed nations? We're no longer a developed nation. We don't even have power in this country. I remember growing up in Turkey, the power would go out. I came to America, I was like, that's amazing, the power never goes out. Oops, not anymore. And so, but for actual developed nations, they all have universal health care. They don't let people die in the streets. And so their average life expectancy is going up, not down. And by the way, their healthcare costs half of what ours costs. Where does the other half go? It goes to corruption. It goes in the pockets of the executives and the politicians and all of that. They rob us blind and take a year off our life. And yes, corporate Democrats like Joe Biden definitely participate in that.
Not to be snarky and make light of the lower life expectancy, but thank God. I mean, I'm tapping out. I don't want to stay here any longer than is absolutely necessary. I mean, come on. You're like you guys said, we live in a failed state. We're living in a third world country at this point. I don't want to live that long, and Canada's not going to take me. So here we are.
Actually, Helen, I understand what you're saying. No, that's not. It's not snarky at all. Like, why would we want to continuously put up with this pathetic excuse for a country when we could literally do anything that we want? I mean, we have enough money to fix any problem we want to fix. Medicare for all should be nothing for us because we have the ability to build planes jets that don't even fly, right? We're able to spend billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars every year for war into the tunes of trillions of dollars, but yet and still we ignore the people. And this is what we're seeing across the country, right? This is what we're seeing in Texas. The ruling elite don't care about what's happening in Texas, no more than they care about all the people who are dying of COVID-19. We're approaching 500,000 people now, 500,000 lives. I always think about the movie V for Vendetta when the big catalyst for the revolution for the protagonist was 80,000 people dying of a virus that the government didn't get control of. We're at 500,000. And so, I mean, I understand what you're saying. They're like, why would we want to continuously put up with a system that has zero regard for our lives, zero regard for what we could be doing better, where we have the ability in this country to literally make healthcare not accessible, but make sure every single person has healthcare. I'll tell you, as a black man, there are so many of us who simply do not have healthcare, healthcare. And if we had something like Medicare for all, of course we would go to the doctor. Of course we would like to see live longer. Longevity has its place, correct? But in this country, they would much rather risk our lives in exchange for their quarterly profit margins.
Yeah, and nobody else is taking us. Canada's not taking us. Europe is not taking us in. I'm buying my coffin now. I'm lining up my casket now because I can't.
I'm not going that far with you. I'm not picking out my coffin. I would rather. I would rather like let's have a revolution first. Let's try it that way. But I agree with you. Like something absolutely has to be done.
Yeah, I think Canada is now saying about us, they're not sending their best. No, but in all seriousness, guys, it's almost part of the reason why we saw the Capitol riots. So obviously we know that the downs, everything about the Capitol riots was the downside, but like we get the madness of that crowd. But one thing I'll say is that now, you see riots in cities and then you see the Capitol riot. And the one thing that they share is unbelievable frustration. And so when people have nothing left to lose, they get dangerous. And we have driven a gigantic percentage of our population. Yes, both Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and progressives. We've driven them to desperation. And now we're taking years off their lives. So when you don't even have your life left to lose, what do you think happens? So I don't want any of this to happen. Desperately trying to avoid it. But these elites that just want to maintain the status quo and keep crushing the rest of us, they're playing with fire. And I don't want them to play with fire. I don't want to be anywhere near that fire. But this, I'm afraid this is not going to end well.
100%. I mean, I just, the thing that Biden said this week about that he won't support eliminating student debt, that he just doesn't support it. And it's like, well, this is how Trump got into office in the first place. And if you just keep going down this road, what do you think's gonna happen in 4 years? Like your job is not secure. Trump is still out there. We haven't made it impossible for him to run again. And the same frustration, Cenk, like you were talking about, and anger and people backed up against a wall that put Trump in the office in the first place, that's gonna come right back and bite you in the ass, Biden, if you don't step it up.
Yeah. And Cenk, I just have to echo what you're saying. The fact that this is why politicians make laws so that their lives can be safe from even the hint of a threat, because they knew that they wanted to play games with our lives. But there is a threshold when people have nothing left to lose. I mean, if you think historically, revolutions have been fought when parents haven't been able to feed their children. And now we're not only at a place where parents can't feed their children, our parents can't even keep their children warm. And so, yeah, they're playing with fire. But I guess the real question is how much more can the American people handle?
Yeah, not much is the answer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break here. We've got more amazing stories with you guys. Like and share the stream so we get the progressive message out to more people. We'll be right back. want to give you guys a couple programming notes and then read some of your comments. A new comment room tonight, exclusively on Twitch. Ooh, I'm feeling that train headed down right now. I mean, is there hype in the air? It looks like it. Anyway, Brett Ehrlich, John Idarola, JR Jackson, Natalie Tran from Community Channel, one of the best comedic YouTubers ever. No joke. Ironic. It's on tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/TYT. Pure VPN, by the way, is one of our sponsors, and we love that they're willing to support progressive outlets, and boy, you need security on your internet, that's for sure. So check them out. They got a 7-day trial just for 99 cents, so you really can't beat that. What do you want, 98 cents? 8 days? Don't be ridiculous. So go to tyt.com/purevpn and make sure you're protected online. All right, I'm going to the members section. Kim wrote in again saying, thanks for using my comment. My family and friends are tired of hearing my progressive views. It's nice to have them appreciated. So 2 things I want to say about that, Kim. You have no idea how much I appreciate you and everyone that's a Young Turk, that's a member, that watches, that reads the comments. Love you guys. Number 2, if you think people are tired of hearing your progressive views, wait till you get a load of me. Earlier today, I was trending on Twitter, and it appears that conservatives were tired of hearing my progressive views. So I hit him with another 10 tweets and told them to shut their effing mouth. Anyway, so we're moving forward. That's my job. Isn't it a fun job? So I'm going to Shadowhawk in our member section. Charging more during a crisis, Texas is such a hypocrite asking for federal aid, but the ones hurting are regular folks. Now, see, that's exactly what I was talking about online. So when you say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to give you the federal aid until you at least say, yes, I'm sorry, we made a terrible mistake. We will connect to the federal energy grid and we will regulate our energy industry. If you're never gonna fix the problem, I don't wanna give you federal aid every time dumbass Republicans in Texas screw up. So now if you say that though, even people on our side who are so kind-hearted are like, no, you don't do that, don't delay the aid for 1 second. And I get what you're saying, Republicans take hostages, but give me send them the aid while pretending that you're holding it up. I'd do anything, right? Because I need the aid to go to the people who need it. But at the same time, rhetorically, it's incumbent upon people like Joe Biden to make the point to the country, this is the fault of the Republicans who deregulated. And they did that for corporate profits and corruption, but they never make that point. All right, we'll be right back. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk, Ben, and Helen with you guys. Let me do a couple of quick shout outs here and then we'll go to the stories. Just because I love the names and you guys. So the people who just joined Young Turks membership on YouTube are the Truth Dragon NJ09. Now, I used to live off the exit 9 in New Jersey. So I don't know if that's what it's a reference to, but I love the Truth Dragon. That's a badass name. So thank you for joining. Katrina Moxie, also a fun name. Robert Lewis, all joined. But they hit that super fun join button. It's right there below the video if you're watching on YouTube. It's going, hello, join. Okay, just real quick on Twitch too. The Kurd Burglar has resubscribed and has been with us for 9 months on Twitch, which I believe is the maximum. The Kurd Burglar. Fun, but except don't rob Kurds if that's what you mean. But other than that, it sounds like a fun name. And then so many people have given so many great things. Boricua Dragon gave 1,000 bits, but I wanted to call out, Progressive NCO did it again with 1,000 bits, but I wanted to call out Depressed Progressive who gave 1,000 bits, because based on what Helen's been saying so far, I think there's some percentage chance it's her.
Who, me? Depressed Progressive? What do we have to be depressed about? Everything, literally everything.
Okay, everything's gonna be all right. We're gonna win, we're gonna win, we're gonna win. Okay, by the way, speaking of which, ninaturner.com/hello. Hope is on the way. All right, Ben, what do you got for us?
More bad news. No, this is just part and parcel of what Republicans are doing across the country. In Georgia, Republicans, state GOP members are attempting to change the rules as it pertains to how a grand jury is summoned in terms of election fraud. In the case of Donald Trump, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has let it be known that she intends on investigating Donald Trump's interference in the 2020 election. To circumvent that investigation, Republican state officials have introduced a bill that would dilute the power of Fulton County, which is predominantly black, which is the county that overwhelmingly helped Joe Biden win the 2020 election, at least for the state of Georgia. They have introduced a bill to dilute that grand jury process by opening every single account of an investigation into election fraud open to all of the counties in the state of Georgia. What that does, obviously, as the state of Georgia is about 32% black, it opens it up to conservatives and white conservatives, particularly, who have a vested interest in protecting Donald Trump. And so here we have yet another example of it's not enough for them to try to overthrow the country on January 6th. They're also trying to change the rules to protect Donald Trump from prosecution in the state of Georgia. We see this time and again. We've seen the Republicans in the state of Georgia, and quite frankly, across the entire country, being willing to not only bend the rules, break the rules, and try to rewrite the rules in order to protect their agenda. But in this case, these rule changes are specifically designed to protect Donald Trump from prosecution, because as we all know, if you get the type of grand jury that you want, then it's very likely that no charges will be brought in the first place. So this is an attempt of the Republicans in the state of Georgia to handcuff the hands of the Fulton County DA and to prevent her from looking into the very clear cases and possible cases of election fraud, because Donald Trump actively tried to overturn the results of the November election. Jake, I mean, and Helen, as we look at this, it's not a surprise. I think the question really is how far can they go? They do have the House, they do have the state House, they have the state Senate, and they have the gubernatorial seat, but they will need a supermajority to overturn or to change this rule. They don't have that supermajority, but it is a shot across the bow. It is an attempt to let it be known that if anyone investigates Donald Trump, then quite frankly, they're willing to change the rules to protect him.
So look, I was gonna say, Ben, that the Republican Party is just flat out turning into a criminal party. And they're celebrating the destruction of law and order and rule of law. And it feels deeply ironic given their rhetoric. But I realized as you were talking, it's actually not exactly right. They've always been a criminal party. At least the right wing has. So let me explain. When Martin Luther King and the rest of the civil rights movement was doing civil disobedience in the South, King in his speeches would point out that they actually were not breaking any law. They were on the side of federal law. And eventually the federal government had to bring in the National Guard to enforce the law, because the people breaking the law were the local sheriffs, the local politicians, and saying, no, we will not follow the law because we hate black people that much. Now, that was the case back then. Now, Republicans are saying, if it means touching our beloved dear leader, we don't want to follow the law. But we were using the law to basically oppress you guys. That's what we meant by rule of law, right? And so if it means that we have to be equal and pursue actual justice, right wingers in this country are saying, we're out. That's not what we meant by law and order. We meant, put a baton upside the head of a minority. We did not mean actually arrest our leaders if they break the law. And so they're now just brazen. They're just raising their hands and saying, yeah, we're gonna try to make sure that our criminals are never caught.
I have thought about this. So I love chocolate cake. Chocolate cake is one of my favorite things to eat. If I poured an entire glass of water onto the top of a slice of chocolate cake, it would be gross. The chocolate cake in this scenario are the black voters of Georgia, and the water are the white voters that are trying to dilute the black voter population of Fulton County.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And that was a curious analogy.
It was a weird.
I hung on as long as I could to it.
Yeah, it was a weird analogy.
I mean, it would have been a little easier if you had like, maybe German chocolate cake or like red velvet cake, or but no. I mean, but the point remains, right? This is literally what they're trying to do.
Dilution is wrong, is what I'm saying.
Especially when it comes to chocolate cake. Do not water down your chocolate cake, and don't water down, I can't believe I'm gonna tie it back in. Don't water down the black vote, right? And this is exactly what's happening. I wanna read a tweet for you from Anthony Cruz. He is from Georgia, he's an attorney from Georgia State University. And he said very candidly, he said, quote, "This is an attack on black political power. If folks engage in election misconduct in Fulton County, then they should face jurors who look like members of the community in Fulton County, subject to discretion of decisions by elected officials empowered by Fulton voters." Now, Fulton County is Atlanta. I mean, there's other cities around it, but Atlanta, it's overwhelmingly black. We call Atlanta Wakanda for a reason. It is the vibranium of the state. But they realize that if the charges are brought solely in the state, or in the county of Fulton County, or even DeKalb County for that matter, then Donald Trump does not stand a chance because the evidence speaks for itself. And Cenk, you're so right. We're at the stage of imperial decline, where the white supremacists in this country say it is not enough for us to be on a level playing field, but if by chance minorities and marginalized communities get an opportunity to have their voice heard and we don't like what they have to say, we will march up the steps of the Capitol and attempt to overthrow the entirety of this democratic experiment for the sake of our bruised ego.
Yeah, so for hundreds of years in this country, we've had white juries, and oftentimes exclusively white juries, put away black people. And as it turns out, oftentimes they weren't guilty at all. And they had almost no evidence. The prosecutors, well, how do we know that? We know that because a lot of them have been let off because the DNA evidence proved that they were not guilty, let alone what we did back in the day. My God, I have no idea what a minuscule percentage of those folks were actually guilty, right? So when whites get to judge blacks, everybody's cool with it in America. But a black jury judging a white person, whoa.
Flag on a plate.
Yeah. No. Where's my water? I got to water down that chocolate cake.
Right? See, you guys made fun of the analogy, but somehow it's clinging on.
Helen, I'm gonna be talking about watering down chocolate cake with water in a bottle of water. What is it? What kind of water are we talking about?
I'd say it's Texas water that's not drinkable right now. I would say that's the water we're talking about.
That is pretty accurate.
Yeah. So one last thing to Helen's substantive point. So it's not just dilution, they also do preemption. So this affects a lot of issues. So a city will pass a law saying, hey, $15 minimum wage. And for example, Philly, Pittsburgh, et cetera, they will do, we talked about this on yesterday's show, paid sick leave, especially during coronavirus. Pittsburgh will pass a law saying, yeah, you get 2 weeks off if you have coronavirus because we don't even want you to come in because everybody else will get sick, right? Then the state of Pennsylvania, filled with Republican legislators, will go, no. If black people are making laws, whether it's in Philly or Atlanta or wherever it might be, we're just not gonna let them. So you have to go into work sick, you will not get higher wages. And if you dare try to prosecute our beloved tyrant, we're just not gonna let you do it. So look, if you care about equal justice in this country, you're nuts to vote for a Republican anywhere. Make sure they do not win, otherwise we'll never have equality.
I mean, this is not even dumping water on a chocolate cake. This is taking a dump on the chocolate cake at this point. I mean, come on.
Just when I was wondering, how can this analogy get any more unfortunate?
Yes, I went there.
Okay.
I have nothing.
That's Helen's tagline. Helen Hong, she'll go there. All right.
Got that?
Let's take a break. All right, guys, we got more important stories for you guys, and apparently fun ones. God knows what we'll say when we come back. All right, we're back, at least during the break, at least to some of you. So if you're watching us, hey. Now that join button, it's still lonely down there. And it's so fun. Saying, why don't you come have a fun party with me? It's invitingly right below the video, either on this side or this side, I can never tell. All right, that's how you become a Young Turks member on YouTube. Everyone else, tyt.com/join. And those are the comments I'm going to right now. Jess writes in, it's almost as if Georgia Republicans know Trump is guilty. I love our viewers. I love our members. That is 100% right. As always, I wish I'd have said that during the story. All right, Bart Kyle, who is actually our audio, we always call it audio guy. We're so sophisticated. Anyway, wrote in, the water used to dilute the chocolate cake is, of course, water from Flint, Michigan. Right, good point, Bart. Gallego44 with a very nice comment. These are the two best power panels in recent memory. Wow, well, you look at that. It turns out you could have your chocolate cake and eat it too. The people who just met and had a great time with the join button were Peter Suba and Stars Girl 0414, because they're now Young Turks members. Love you guys. You're now part of our family. Welcome. So now we go to YouTube Super Chat. Trisha Briggs says, here's a few bucks. Freaking love you guys. TYT, epic trendsetters. Hard to disagree. Okay, the real marijuana, good to see you again, by the way, writes in, now this on a more somber note. It's awful in Texas right now. I had to tell my elderly neighbors that I couldn't give them any more firewood. We needed to warm the house and boil our water. This truly feels dystopian. Because it is. They're turning us back into serfs and indentured servants. Why do you think they don't want to cancel the student debt? One of the reasons is that if you owe a huge amount of money, you must go work at a corporation to pay it off. And then you're stuck. You can't, it's much harder to start your own business. It's much harder to do something you love. And that's how they turn, and the student debt doesn't go away in 7 years. It takes sometimes a lifetime to pay it down. But when they proposed immigration reform back in the day, it was for 14 years. Indenture, you had to work here 14 years before you had a chance to become a citizen. That's twice as long as indentured servitude. They've truly turned America into a dystopian society where the lords rule us all, and I can't stand it. Let's get America back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, Ben, and Helen with you guys. Yesterday we asked you a poll about Governor Cuomo. Should New York State Democrats strip Cuomo of his emergency pandemic powers because of his lies about the nursing homes, etc.? And now we have a progressive audience, so obviously if the Republicans are right that we'll just reflexively be partisan, we'll defend a Democratic governor. Well, interestingly enough, 85% said yes, strip him of his powers. Only 15%, actually 14%, said no, don't strip him of his powers. So progressives are not partisan. We're actually honest and care about reality and truth. So love that you guys participated in that. Check out all of our polls at tyt.com/polls. All right, Ben, what's next?
Yeah, so speaking of parties that are partisan, Republicans had an opportunity to rid themselves of Donald Trump. They chose not to in the impeachment process. And as we talked about in Georgia, they are choosing to protect them from prosecution for intervening in the 2020 election. And you would think that they would take this opportunity to distance themselves from someone who is so destructive to their party, but instead they have decided to seek after and kiss the ring of Donald Trump. Several politicians have gone down. Kevin McCarthy was down there on January 28th. Lindsey Graham is on his way down. And according to Bash and Warren from CNN, they said the following, quote, Senator Lindsey Graham is heading to Mar-a-Lago this weekend to meet with Donald Trump in hopes of bridging a growing rift in the top echelon of the Republican Party. CNN has learned Graham plans to spend his time on the golf course with Trump, ideally convincing the former president that regaining congressional majorities for Republicans will help bolster his own presidential legacy. Now, Lindsey Graham has apparently been upset about the Republican infighting, but there's not enough infighting for them to actually part ways with Donald Trump. And I want to read one more quote from Lindsey Graham. This is what he said. He said, "They're now at each other's throat. I'm more worried about 2022 than I've ever been. I don't want to eat our own. President Trump is the most consequential Republican in the party. If Mitch McConnell doesn't understand that, he's missing a lot." So Cenk and Helen, instead of distancing themselves from the problematic nature of Trumpism, they're doubling down on it. But everyone's not invited to the party. Nikki Haley attempted to get an invite to Mar-a-Lago, and she has been rejected because she gave the mildest of criticisms of Donald Trump. In fact, you can't even really call it a criticism, but to not speak flatteringly of the emperor with no clothes is the same as insulting the emperor with no clothes. So the Republicans have decided, instead of recreating the party into something that has a viable lifespan beyond the majorities of aggrieved white people in this country, they've decided to cast their lots with Donald Trump and go to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring. What are your thoughts?
I'm enjoying the accidental euphemisms of this story, like kiss the ring. They're going down to see Trump. And then Lindsey Graham helps us by saying, I don't want to eat our own. Are you sure, Lindsey? Are you sure? Okay, at the end of the quote, Lindsey added, precious. Yeah, go ahead, Al.
Like, what kind of Stockholm syndrome does this entire party have? They had a chance to get rid of him. They were this close. They just had like a handful of votes to make sure he could never run again. They never had to deal with him or kiss up to him or suck up to him ever again. He's abusive. He's talked crap about every single one of these people, and they couldn't do it. It's like that scene in Game of Thrones, Reek. Remember that character Reek?
100%.
When his sister was like, come on, you can escape. And he's like, no, I want to live in this barred cage and be abused for the rest of my life. It's like, what is happening?
This is absolutely accurate. Donald Trump literally came in and just bashed everyone from little Marco Rubio to Lindsey Graham to calling Ted Cruz's wife ugly, and all of these individuals turned around and subsequently decided to lick his boots. That said, Nikki Haley, I want to read the quote that she gave that actually put her on the outs. And the reason I want to read it is because I want people to understand it is the mildest of critiques. They are dealing with a level of absolutism in the Republican Party as it pertains to worshiping Donald Trump, that if you say anything out of line, you are now on the outside. And so this is the quote that got her in trouble with Donald Trump. She said, I think Donald Trump is going to find himself further and further isolated. I think his business is suffering at this point. I think he lost any sort of political viability he was going to have. I think he's lost social media, which meant the world to him. I mean, I think he's lost the things that really could have kept him moving. I don't think he's going to be in the picture. I don't think he can. He's fallen so far. Now, this is not a real criticism in the world of politics, not when Donald Trump has insulted everyone's how they look, how they dress, how they speak, how they live, how they breathe. Donald Trump is not above demolishing his opponents. But when Nikki Haley said this, she is now on the outs of the party and outs of Donald Trump. And so her future in the Republican Party is now at risk because Republicans did not get rid of their Führer.
But by the way, so Nikki Haley, of course, right afterwards had to bow all the way down and beg and grovel for forgiveness. She then did an op-ed. I didn't mean any of it. I'm so sorry. I love Donald Trump like everyone else. By the way, I'm a strong politician, if you say so. So the one thing that I'm enjoying, guys, on all of this is the Republican politicians who had been pretending to be strong all these years, now revealing themselves as the pathetic little dogs that they are. And look, you can see it and you know it too. If you're a conservative, you know it too. Trump called Lindsey Graham every word in the English language, right? And then he doxed them. He gave his phone number to everyone so they could threaten him. Then Trump supporters nearly attacked Lindsey Graham at the airport, and then they all nearly got killed in the Capitol riots. In that Capitol riots, Lindsey Graham was a sweaty little. Anyway, and he was yelling at the sergeant at arms, "Why won't you protect us?" Right? He still goes down there, gets all the way down, not even on all fours, just like on the ground, and like Ben said, he's just licking his boots. And that's who Lindsey Graham is, the lowest of the low. Ted Cruz, guys, look, if you're a right winger too, like you have some dignity, don't you? If somebody said your dad was a murderer and your wife was ugly and you were a liar, he called him Lion Ted. He gave him that nickname. You'd have 1 ounce of self-respect and stand up to that guy, wouldn't you? Even if it costs you your job or something. You know the old song, "Take this job and shove it"? Doesn't that come from the South? Okay, right, but no, like the Lindsey Grahams of the world, you go, "They take this job and shove it in me."
My favorite part about this story is that of all these men, it was the one woman, Nikki Haley, who found her cojones for like a second. She was the one person who like tried to locate her cojones and then located them for a second and then was like, oh no, got it. Nope, I lost the cojones. Sorry, I lost them. Can't find them. And you know, I just there's no, I don't know if we're allowed to say there's no balls anywhere to be found.
Yeah, we're gonna permit that. So look, I want to say something important though, substantively here. There's a reason why they're doing it. It's not just because they're grovelers by nature, although that's certainly true. But it's because the Republican voters are with Trump. So even after the Capitol riots, his popularity in the Republican Party is sky high. You oppose him at your peril. So the Republican voters saw how dumb he was and they loved it. Incompetence that killed nearly 500,000 Americans with coronavirus, no problem. In fact, we'll help you. We'll take off our masks. We won't do vaccines. Come on, you can shoot me on 5th Avenue. I'll let you get away with it, right? And they saw how hateful he was and they were there for it. And they saw all of his criminal activity and they even saw the violence. And they still said, yes, I love that violence as long as it's used to oppress others. So that's exactly why they're all groveling to Trump, because he does represent Republican voters. All right, we got to do a post game. You're going to absolutely love it. We'll see you there in a minute.
You know, old school's pitched to me from Cenk. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps f***ing cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck.
But what makes you stop right before 40? What makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. And there's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
Heard of it? I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Kingsley.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Craig starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies. And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good.
John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Our community faces a never-before-seen public health and economic crisis. Businesses are calling Levin Papantonia with their legal questions regarding COVID-19. You've asked and we've answered. If you're a business owner and have suffered financial loss or closure from COVID-19 and have questions regarding your insurance policy, call us for a free consultation. Some policies may provide coverage for lost profits and earnings. Stay safe, and together we'll get through this.
post game. We're gonna let Helen curse in a second. Okay, but give us a minute here. We're gonna do one more fun story for you guys, and then we'll let it rip, okay? So Ben, take it away.
It's gonna take a lot for me not to cuss at this story, but can you imagine someone being even lower than Ted Cruz? Well, it would be Sean Hannity, who went out of his way. He went so far out of his way to defend Ted Cruz's trip to Cancun that Ted Cruz himself had to double back and correct Sean Hannity on the particular details. Let's take a look at that clip.
You went and you took your daughters to Cancun and you came back. I think you can be a father and be the senator of Texas all at the same time and make a round trip, quick drop off trip and come home. I'm not really sure. I thought we learned during COVID that teleschool, telemedicine, teleworking, Zoom calls, all this other stuff changed the way we do everything. Now, I'm not assuming that the people of Texas thought you were going to go out there with blow torches and antifreeze and get the wind turbines going, but you raise a good question, and that is, with all the natural resources of Texas, why is Texas relying on wind turbines? I didn't see much criticism there early lid that Joe Biden put on things, while the people in Texas, you could use federal help. But there's always that double standard. You made the right call coming back. You also can be a father. There's also something called technology. We also know what teleworking is. And I think there's a lot of sanctimony and politics being played in this attack.
Now, Ted Cruz came back later on and let him know that, that he didn't intend on coming back immediately, but that's besides the point. Sean Hannity also included his little jab against renewable energy, windmills, as if the problem in Texas is a problem of the Green New Deal, but this doesn't stop Republicans and conservatives and apparatchiks like Sean Hannity from doing the bidding of big energy and protecting the oil industry at the expense of human life. But Helen and Jake, it is really something. I thought Sean Hannity at least had enough self-dignity to preserve his reputation, but he's managed to go lower than Ted Cruz. So maybe that's just my naivete.
Yeah. So first of all, I loved every part of those excuses. I mean, you would just go to drop them off. Is that a thing people do? They go to Cancun to drop off their kids? Maybe rich people do it. I don't know. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'll pay for a whole plane ticket and I'll waste a whole day to go drop off the kids at the Ritz-Carlton at Cancun. But he made it sound in the beginning like, oh, I had to, because who else is gonna drop off the kids? Your wife was with you.
Exactly. It's not like his wife wasn't there and she's completely incapable of taking 2 kids to Cancun.
Yeah, and then of course we found out later, no, his itinerary was that he was gonna stay through Saturday. From Wednesday to Saturday. So even Cruz was embarrassed enough, as Ben pointed out later in the interview, to say, I mean, I was gonna stay through Saturday. Okay.
My favorite part of that video is that Hannity is going on and on and on. And it's the split screen with Cruz, and Cruz is like, yeah.
Ted Cruz is like, if you really are going to go this far on my behalf, don't let me stop you. But
like he's just sweating. He's like, yeah, is that what you said? Yeah, I mean, that's right. Hilarious. Look at his face.
He's like, go Sean, go, Sean, go. That's what he's thinking.
Totally, he's thinking like, thank God he's saying it, because I would have been embarrassed to say that.
Actually, for a guy though, what really trips me out about Ted Cruz is the way he threw his everything, but the way he threw his daughters under the bus in the first place. Like, who does that to your children? Like, your children are going to be able to look this up today, right? In 6 years, their future spouses, their children are gonna look up and say, why did Pop throw you under the bus, Mom? And what are they gonna say? Like, well, because our dad was Ted Cruz. He didn't stand up for Heidi Cruz, so why would we expect him to stand up for the children?
I cannot wait till the day when those Cruz girls get their Twitter handle. Oh, I cannot wait. Oh. I mean, they're just.
Yes.
I don't even want to see it. But look, Ben, the entire Cruz family is under that bus. So Trump called his dad a murderer, and Ted Cruz like, who cares? It's politically expedient now to kiss Donald Trump's ass. So under the bus you go, Dad. He called his wife ugly. Under the bus you go. The daughter's now under the bus, and even Snowflake, their dog, they left him at home in the freezing house. So, I mean, if he'll do it to Snowflake, he'll do it to anybody.
Who calls their dog? See, they're so ideologically just asinine that they go as far as to call their dog Snowflake because he wanted to make a political statement, and then Snowflake almost froze. So there you go.
Okay, but by the way, why did they get a sneaking suspicion that their dog was liberal? Like that's the thing they call like people on the left. But ironically, they didn't give Snowflake a safe space.
Jake, I'm in the age category now where all of your jokes are funny to me, man. I'm seriously like they are dad jokes to be sure, but I appreciate them because they really resonate with my spirit. I thank you for that.
I'm 100% with you, Ben. Like, I just want to know, like, with Snowflake, like Medicare for all, we're free.
Green New Deal.
Ted Cruz is like, all he wants is treats, and he's not even a millionaire. No,
what's a handout?
Snowflake.
The dog wants a handout. The dog needs food and shelter, and the dog needs a Snowflake.
The dog is like student death relief.
Can I get a minimum treat?
Scooby snacks for all? I don't know. I'm sorry. I had to throw it.
So look, last thought on this is I'm going to bring us down by talking about policy. So Hannity mentioned wind turbines. No, that's been 100% debunked. It was the oil and gas pipelines that froze. They're the overwhelming majority of the energy grid in Texas, and they're the ones that froze. And that was because they were deregulated, and the government suggested that they get insulation for a situation like this, but didn't make them get it. And then lo and behold, they decided not to take on those costs so they could make more money. And then eventually, when you die, that's your problem, not theirs. And now, by the way, they're asking for government handouts. So when Hannity says, "Oh, Joe Biden's fault," for what? He gave federal aid instantly. What he should have done is said, no, until you connect to the federal energy grid, which would have saved you in this instance, I'm not giving you federal aid because you're being dumb and endangering the lives of your own citizens.
I mean, we just said in a previous story, an earlier story this hour, that the gas company in Texas is high-fiving themselves, being like, cha-ching. We've hit the jackpot with these people freezing to death. We got them over the barrel. And then he's gonna bring up wind turbines? Get the F out of here, Hannity.
And that all that tele stuff was hilarious too. Like, oh no, we could do tele aid to people in need. It totally happens. You could do tele food. You just shove the food into the camera, and then the people who don't have any food in Houston will just magically get. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Okay. AOC actually raised $2 million to actually help them. And finally, let me make this note. Ted Cruz is like, no, I'm back. I'm here to help the people of Texas. That's why I immediately did a giant media tour. And I'm going to what's really important. I'm not in Cancun anymore. I'm talking to Sean Hannity on Fox News, and that's how I'm spending my time.
Yeah.
How is that better?
All I can say is I hope that Snowflake took the biggest dump in their bed while they were gone.
Helen, no mercy. You know why? Helen thinks it's a dog-eat-dog world. You got to do what you got to do.
I'm in good company here. I'm going to tell that joke to my kids. I love it.
I tell such dad jokes that other dads tell their kids those jokes.
I'm going to recycle them. I promise you, I'm recycling a couple of these today.
All right, I'm proud. You know, if I ever need a 8th profession, I'm going the dad comedian.
I'll book you. Listen. No, let me be your manager. I got you.
All right. Okay. So, Helen, what have you been up to these days?
It's been fun times worrying that my parents are gonna get their asses kicked in the street for no reason.
I know.
My biggest thing is, I'm so enraged about these Asian elder attacks. And the thing that enrages me the most is that every single one of these attackers has attacked from behind. So not only are they picking on like 60, 70, 80-year-old people, but they're attacking them from behind, so these poor people don't even see it coming, have no chance to defend themselves. And, because that's what weak, pathetic pieces of shit these people are. And my message to these people is, why don't you take this time and energy to go locate your balls instead? Because they are nowhere to be found.
Yeah, so I've talked about this a bunch of times on the show, but it fits here. Like, what I liked to fight when I was a kid. I know I'm incredibly strange. I literally even like to taste the blood in my mouth. And I was like, let's get it on, right? So if anybody wanted to fight, I was like, and they try to pick on the weak kids, I was like, no. I'll be your huckleberry, right? And it's also proverbial and rhetorical and political too. And I was talking about that on social media today. You want to fight? I'm your guy, okay? So, but what that has led to is a lifetime of finding out what bullies are about. And I swear to God, it's not just a cliche, it's true. They're all cowards to the core. And so like the weakest man in America is Donald Trump. So the biggest bullies are the ones that are the most insecure. They seem like egomaniacs, but that's only because of how afraid they are of how inadequate they are. So imagine what kind of a coward pushes an 84-year-old man from behind and then runs away, right? You think that guy's gonna get into a real conflict, into a real fight? But forget real fight. I mean, that's nonsense. Fights, physical fights are nonsense any way you slice it. You think that guy's gonna stand up for himself at work or in any other situation that counts? Nah, he's a pussy. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, and so the only joy he can get is out of picking on someone that he knows is defenseless and doesn't know that he's coming. Yeah. So I don't, yeah.
It's so enraging, and it's also been enraging. Like a lot of these attacks have happened in broad daylight in front of other people, and that's been the other disappointing thing too. And it's such a cliche, like if you see something, say something, but it kind of fits. If you're a bystander, no matter who you are, what race you are, what gender you are, like at the very least being like, hey, that's fucked up what you just did. That's not right. Or who do you think you are, or something? The whole thing has been so disappointing. And my parents are in their 70s. They're 70-year-old Korean immigrants, and my dad just had an altercation in a supermarket parking lot where a guy like shoved a shopping cart at him at full force, tried to hit him, and it's just.
Yeah. So Helen, I'm curious. How did that altercation start?
Completely unprovoked. My dad was returning a shopping cart to like the little cart corral area, and he was like pushing the cart in. And as he turned around, it was actually an employee of this supermarket. The employee that was collecting the carts in the parking lot, and he full force with all of his might shoved this cart at my dad, narrowly missed my dad's body, but the cart ran over his foot. My dad then later went home and found like his big toe was black, like like he was injured. And if the cart had hit him, and this guy was a younger guy, in his 30s, and pushed a cart at full force at my 76-year-old tiny Korean father. I mean, the level of cowardice, and the heartbreaking thing is my dad was like, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm not gonna get into a verbal altercation. Like, I don't speak English well enough. And I was like, oh, had I been there, had I been there, I would have shredded this asshole, you know?
He would have fucked with the wrong person if you were there, Helen.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
the whole thing is upsetting.
Did your dad wind up telling the manager?
No, and in fact, my dad was making a return. He had bought something that wasn't good at the supermarket, and so he was there to make a return. So he ignored the guy, was like, what am I gonna do? Like, get into it with this guy, forget it. Let it go, went into the store, went to the service desk to make the return, but I think the guy saw him thinking he was making a complaint about him, and then started screaming obscenities at him.
What?
In the store, and the clerk behind the desk is like, what's going on? Did something happen? The guy was like, no. My dad was like, no. Like, my dad was just taking the higher road, and my dad's a very wise, he's a Korean War survivor. Like, he's been through some shit. So he's just taking the higher road and being a wise person. And he's like, I'm not gonna fight with a guy. Like, clearly he has stuff going on in his life. He's a 30-year-old young fit guy who's working in a supermarket parking lot. Like, I'm not gonna get into it with him. And I was like, I'll get into it with him. I was like, I am not the bigger person. I want this guy's name. I want his ID number. I want his social security. Like, I wanted to fucking get into it with this guy, but.
Yeah, it's another tagline for Helen. Helen Hong, I am not the bigger person.
I am never the bigger person. I will get into it with you. I will get down and dirty.
Helen Hong, fuck around and find out. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you, Ben. I'm making t-shirts.
Yes. So look, it's also a little bit of old school Asian culture, right? So we get to be the next generation. And it's easier for us. But this another story I tell often. It's an amazing story out of one of Malcolm Gladwell's books. South Korean airlines used to crash more than other airlines.
All the time.
And they're like, they check the planes 1,000 times. They're like, we don't get it. There's no technical difficulties. What the hell's going on? And then when they studied the black boxes in aggregate, they found out the co-pilots, just because of etiquette about being impolite, would not tell the pilots there's a mountain up ahead. Right.
That is one of my favorite stories. It's deference. It was deference. The co-pilots would be like, pilot, sir, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I feel like we're about to crash into a mountain.
Yeah, but not even. It would be like even more coded, more polite. Like, if there were to be a large object that were to be near. Meanwhile, what they should have been saying is, pull the fuck up, pull up now, we're all gonna die. Yeah. And by the way, they all died in all of those instances.
That's right.
And they would rather die than be impolite. So in a culture that emphasizes that, unfortunately, it makes it easier for folks to pick on them.
That's right.
Or elderly Asians. And that's what actually enrages me even more. Yeah. And there's one last part of this, and that's partly why they target them, right? Again, back to the cowards. And by the way, at least half the time that I told the bully, I'll be your Huckleberry, right? They ran away. Because they don't want to fight someone of equal strength. They want to fight someone who they think is weaker. That's what makes them a bully, because they're fucking cowards. Anyway. Yeah. Now, but back to this story. So I was talking to my mother-in-law, who's also Asian, and of course everybody's worried about it. And now it's gone, and almost everybody who's Asian in the country knows about. Certainly in California knows about it because it's happening here more. And then I heard something super disturbing. She was hearing from other elderly Asians, oh, it's because Trump's not here anymore, and which makes no sense at all, right? Trump is the one that picked on Asians in the first place, right? And blamed coronavirus on them and called it the China virus, etc. But they said another meme that was going around on social media that was unfortunately deceiving these folks was, oh no, Biden now is having the illegal immigrants get the vaccine first. Like, but why? Why would he do that? They can't even vote. Like, none of it makes any sense, right? It's the exact opposite of what's true. But now all they got to do is put a meme online. Oh yeah, they attacks against Asians. That's because of Biden.
Yeah.
What?
Wow. Wow. I mean, I want to. The thing I want to tie this all back to the stuff that we fight about generally as progressives, which is that everybody is frayed so thin, right? Because like we were talking about, we're all backed into a corner now. We have nothing else to lose. Half of us don't have health care. Our businesses are failing. We're unemployed because of COVID. Like all of these social safety nets are gone. And that's the thing that pushes people to the point where like, well, I'm in such a bad place personally. I'm just gonna go push a 90-year-old Asian person over because my life sucks. And it's all interconnected. I genuinely feel like if we had universal health care, if the government cared enough to give us a basic income or social safety nets to make sure that the lowest people in our society are not falling through the cracks, that stuff like this would be much rarer.
Yeah. I just one thing about that's so true. First, actually, two things. One, just on a lighter note, Helen is literally in a corner there in that shot. so she says, we're backed into a corner. I'm like, oh my God, you literally are. Right? So anyways, we can take the most serious story and just make it ridiculous.
So irreverent when we have to.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, Helen's exactly right. I mean, think about it. Has the Dalai Lama ever pushed a 90-year-old down? No, because he's generally at peace, right? People who are at peace, people who are happy, people who are satisfied don't go around pushing the elderly. People who are deeply, deeply dissatisfied with their life do that. And we've created a whole, I can't say class of people, it's the majority who are deeply dissatisfied. Why do you think all those MAGA and QAnon guys are so mad? They're working at Walmart for $7.25.
Yeah.
They used to have jobs at $25, $30, $35, $45 an hour. How do you go from $45 an hour to $7.25 working at Walmart and having your boss yell at you and keep you down? And that'll drive you crazy enough to think that people eat kids, right? And the media keeps telling them, no way, no, your life is grand. The stock market's doing great. Shut the fuck up and take the status quo. So the right wing is going, no, the media is definitely lying to me. So people must be eating babies. Like, I don't know how they made that connection, but they got desperate enough to find like an insane conspiracy theory because to them it was more plausible than the status quo being great.
It's 100%, and that's why I feel like, the fighting for progressive causes is directly fighting against racism, against bigotry, against like literally it's the disaffected white, the greater majority, the biggest population of this country are white people, poor white people, and they're so disaffected that the racism is rising up, the bigotry is rising up, the violence is rising up, and I think that's really the bottom line. I genuinely feel like we would have less racism and bigotry in this country if we all had healthcare and a basic minimum wage, like a livable minimum wage.
Yeah, well, look, it triggers their anger, their frustration, their envy. And in a sense, like all those MAGA guys are basically saying, now on top of all of that, you're not going to let me pretend to be better than black people? Like for them, that's a bridge too far. Right.
So one thing I had is I was superior to blacks. Come on.
Yeah. That was the last straw for them. The only thing I would add to this is I see it slightly different, but not in any really meaningful way. I just don't have a lot of hope in humanity. Like I think we honestly I want to have hope in humanity, but I feel like we could give a lot of people everything. And I was covering the South Carolina primaries, and I went to just this random bar to grab some wings. And the guy who was in there by himself, he owned the place. He was most miserable. I mean, he was angry. He was ready to fight just because of just talking about these situations. Turned out he's a millionaire. And he was the most rabidly bigoted, just conspiratorial, just mindlessly conservative that I have ever met in person. But he's a millionaire, and he has like everything that he needs. And from the average American's perspective, you have $1 million, you're a millionaire, you could take care of yourself. So, I mean, I agree with everything else that you guys say. I don't know that I have a lot of hope that some people, the root of their bigotry is really in the cruelty being the point, that some of them actually just enjoy the cruelty.
Yeah, and I don't want to oversimplify it, Ben. Of course you're right. And then there's also the software that we were all ingrained with. The stereotypes, etc., and that's inside of all of our heads, and I hate that poison circles around even our heads, right? And so it, and then there's the brainwashing, the new software, the Fox News, etc., that's gotten even to some of our family members, and usually, unfortunately, the elderly. It's like Fox News is, in a sense, those. People in the street pushing down the elderly, they just do it psychologically. And so I've seen so many elderly people now that go, oh no, I'm afraid. And Fox News says it's the baby eaters. And now, to be fair to Fox News, they don't say the baby eaters, but they say it's the Democrats, it's the liberals. AOC is going to come and take away your burgers, and they're like, no, I like the burger. Don't take away the burger.
AKA the baby eaters.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ways that I've been combating this is I've been interviewing my parents about their life stories, because they have incredible life stories. Both of my parents are Korean War survivors. And I'm about to launch a YouTube channel called Old Korean Dad Stories and Sometimes Mom.
Such a hell.
It's amazing.
I love it. All right, last programming notes here, because we got to go, guys. So number one, on yesterday's show, we accidentally said Jeff Weaver when talking about the hideous John Weaver from the Lincoln Project, the guy who got caught texting the boys and about all the things that the rest of the story. Jeff Weaver is a wonderful progressive who is a critical member of Bernie Sanders' team. Honest mistake, obviously, it was John Weaver. Okay, number two, speaking of Helen's great titles, don't forget to check out Jobsolete and Go Fact Yourself. And Helen's new shirt, Helen Hong, Fact Around and Find Out.
There it is. Fact around and find out. That's perfect.
I love it.
That's perfect.
All right, Ben, Helen, love you guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And you at home everywhere, we love you too. Go enjoy the weekend. We'll see you guys on Monday.
Take care.